we have this season's first Grayson's Grades. Scott, welcome on the show, man. How are you? Are you awake?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I took a nap when I got home late last night.
So you basically haven't slept yet. You drove up to Foxborough for the game, and then you got in your car and drove right back.
Yeah, because, that's when you hit less traffic. So I just decided to do it that way, and I flew right through New York City, which doesn't really happen often.
That's
and, yeah, got home, I took a little bit of a nap, and, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, that's a Super Bowl champion move right there. No days off, no sleep. You're getting in the car, and you're coming right back. So, Scott, thanks for joining us. Also, thanks for grabbing that audio, the Malcolm Jenkins audio. I know we have some other clips that you put together for us that we may get to later in the show, so we appreciate that. But you were there last night, and I just ran it for about 20 minutes about the new helmet rules. But we're going to get into the game and what you saw. Obviously, your grades coming up. But before we get into each player's performance, what did you think about that game? Because, man, it was a weird one.
Well, yeah, I mean, to me, that the helmet, the lowering the helmet rule was kind of what dominated it in my mind, because it just totally took over the first half. Every single one of the Patriots' drives were aided by one of those calls, or in Malcolm Jenkins' case, it was hitting a defenseless receiver, which to me was a bang-bang play, and he didn't go for the head. So, I mean, I don't know what more the guy's supposed to do in real speed, the way it's as fast as this game moves. You heard, I'm sure you guys played that, some of what Malcolm said about that, and I talked to Nigel Bradham too, and quite frankly, these guys are just confused. They don't really know what to do or how to interpret that rule. Some of them, and I agreed with this sentiment too, they tend to call those kind of things really strict in the preseason. And then as the regular season comes around, they relax it a little bit more. So they don't really know what to believe at this point. And I asked several of them on defense, do you have to change the way that you go to hit a player next week versus this week? And, after playing this game for so long, they really said they don't really know how to do that. So it's going to be interesting to watch how these guys try to maneuver out of this and figure out what exactly the rule is, how they can avoid getting those flags next week in Cleveland.
Scott Grayson with us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Before we leave the helmeting topic, Scott, and get into your grades, did you see Seth Joyner's tweet last night?
No, I did not.
He tweeted out, he said, so apparently it's okay for an offensive player to lower his head to protect himself or to run over a defender with no flag thrown. But if a defender lowers his head to get leverage on an offensive player or to make a tackle, it's a penalty. Fix this, NFL.
Yeah, and, I saw several people tweeting, I think he's right. I mean, and a couple of the defensive guys were asked that question. What happens if an offensive guy lowers his head to try to, get a couple of extra yards? Well, I guess technically that's supposed to be a penalty too, although they don't even, again, they're confused. And, Nigel Bradham, when he hit a guy who was going down to the ground, it was just happened. He went and threw his shoulder down at him and he got a flag. So, it is interesting, and I saw several tweets from some people saying that the NFL should this is a bogus rule that they should go to if they feel like they need to do something, look at college's targeting rule, which I think is better than what we saw last night, the way it was called. Now, that was one NFL crew, and then you run into this issue. How will another NFL crew call it? Perhaps a little bit more relaxed, maybe even a little more strict, who knows? But it was definitely all going against the Eagles last night.
All right, Scott, let's pull out the report card. You can see Grayson's grades on our website at 97.3 ESPN. Two guys got A's. Two guys I thought that had pretty good games. I agree with your grading in this instance.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I gave Nate Sudfeld an A. He got, a lot of time, and I thought we might see Hackenberg, but we didn't. Sudfeld took over for Nick Foles when he got injured, and although I think he was about to come in anyway, and played in half. Had a really good game. I mean, he completed 22 of 39 passes for 312 yards, had 3 touchdowns, one very beautiful throw to Richard Rodgers in the corner of the end zone. He put that ball in the air, put a lot of air under it for Rodgers to go get it, and Rodgers hadn't even made his first or second move at that point. So that was really phenomenal to see some of Sudfeld's development in those moments. I thought his pocket presence was, a little better than I remember from times we saw him last year and and last week. So he's said he's been working on his footwork. I think we saw a little bit of that. He did have one interception in the game, but I didn't penalize him off of that. That hit Matt Jones in the face mask, which really needs to be caught and bounced right into the hands of a defender. Also gave an A to Shelton Gibson. I thought that his kickoff return runs have really been coming along. I think he's got a real future potentially in that area. I think he's going to make this roster partly because of that. And then what he did receiving was also impressive. 5 catches, 90 yards and a touchdown. The touchdown he had, I mean, he made that defender leave his jockstrap right there at about the 3-yard line and was wide open. An easy throw for Sudfeld to hit him for a touchdown. So Gibson, I think, is looking good. Nate Sudfeld is looking pretty good himself. And, you know, there's some things he said he needs to clean up, and I'd agree with some of that. But all in all, I think he's progressing well as Gibson, too.
And 3 guys get a B from your grading standpoint. One guy that if you just looked on the one play, you'd say that can't be worth a B, but Sidney Jones still gets a B from you from the other plays that he was involved in.
Yeah, I liked what Jones did overall. I thought Sidney played a better game than Avonte Maddox, who we talked yesterday about that being kind of a position battle for the nickel slot corner spot. And I thought Jones played a better game. He was more on his receivers. I think he had a couple of chances to make some interceptions, but couldn't hold on to the ball. And then, of course, the one play you're talking about, Cordarrelle Patterson just took him to school. I mean, absolutely made him lose his shoes at about the 10-yard line and had an easy walk-in touchdown after Jones dove for his feet, which he's got to have better form. He's got to know not to dive for the legs. He's got to go make the tackle. And that's something that I think Rasul Douglas does pretty well, who I gave a B to as well. Rasul Douglas, I think, does really well with some of those pursuing the ball, quick tackles on short pass plays, which you need to have against the Patriots. Had 2 big ones early in the game to set up a 3rd and goal for the Patriots, but then they ended up, getting a touchdown on the next play. Jordan Hicks, I also gave a B to. I thought he looked pretty good. He's just a solid player ever since he came into this league. He's really established himself on this linebacking core. He's the anchor back there. I think he's had a really good, preseason. I think he's had a really good career up till now, but he's got to stay healthy for a whole season, and that's the biggest challenge he's got coming in here. Had 5 tackles last night. Overall, I thought a pretty decent game.
All right, Scott, let's move to the grades that I saw way too much of growing up, the lower ones here. And unfortunately, we have to start with the Super Bowl MVP, Nick Foles.
Yeah, not good. I mean, anybody who watched that game knows that. I saw plenty of panicked fans on Twitter last night just, okay, what? They had one good run in the playoffs, and now he's nothing. Well, just settle down, everybody. It's
right.
Okay. It's one game. They don't game plan for this. He was missing numerous starters. Nelson Aguilar, Alshon Jeffrey. He didn't have all his weapons. Didn't have his starting left tackle and Jason Peters either. To me, he looked rusty. His timing with receivers looked off. Mike Wallace didn't have a catch last night, and Foles tried to get him the ball a couple of times, but let him out of bounds one time. I think a lot of that's timing. It's just more reps that need to take place. Now, if that's the case, it doesn't look like Foles is probably going to get many reps in the next little bit because of the injury he suffered to his shoulder strain to his throwing shoulder. So, Foles did not look good, but, he didn't look good in December either when they weren't really game planning for games. And look what happened when they started game planning more to what Nick does. So yeah. I would not push any kind of red buttons here with what you saw out of Nick Foles last night. But the grade was warranted, in my opinion, did not do well. 3 of 9 passes for 44 yards and that sack fumble that turned into a 54-yard scoop and score.
Right, and that's the grade of a D that Nick Foles received. Before we move on, Scott, is there any update for the listeners on the Foles shoulder injury?
The Eagles really play this close to the vest. It's the way they handled all the injuries last year as well. Doug Peterson won't talk until tomorrow. That's when we'll really get an idea of the extent of this injury and potentially how long he could be out. My gut tells me we probably won't see him anymore this preseason, but depending on the extent of it, he could be okay for week 1, but Doug Peterson will have a lot more on that, I'm sure, tomorrow.
Right, and you mentioned the offensive line when you were discussing Nick Foles. What grade did you give the boys up front?
Well, I gave them also a D. Now, some of the Eagles gave up 8 sacks. Some of those were not offensive line related. Jay Ajayi missed a block that led to, a sack. I believe there was another running back in the game at one time that missed a block. But Vaitai, was the guy who whiffed on the block that Foles got hurt on. I just totally missed. And, he's got to make that block. If you're the left tackle, and Vaitai, look, let's give the guy credit before I bash him here. He really did a great job late last season filling in for Jason Peters. But last night missed on a few things. Taylor Hart also missed a block that caused Nate Sudfeld to get sacked. So there was not good, solid offensive line play. It looked like the quarterbacks were constantly under duress, trying to avoid some of that pressure and unable to really do a whole lot with it. Not only that, the rushing yards weren't there either last night. I mean, nothing was there. The Eagles got down to the goal line, couldn't rush it in. It just was not pretty up front. And that's a battle that last year the offensive line a lot of times was winning. So that's got to get better as the preseason goes on.
Yeah, and Scott, you were able to join us yesterday to preview this game, and one of the biggest names that we talked about yesterday was Matt Jones. So Matt Jones was essentially a no-call, no-show last night. What was the grade that you gave the running back?
I gave him an F. I just didn't like what I saw at all. He had an opportunity. Now, you don't know if he was pressing because he knows pressure to try to put stuff on tape and try to make this roster. But, he finished with 6 carries for 19 yards. He caught 6 passes on 9 targets for 32 yards. That doesn't sound too bad, but when you see that the 3, misses on those 9 targets, 2 of them hit off of his hands or his face mask. One of them resulted in an interception. The other one almost did as well. That's not what you need out of a running back. You need a guy who's short-handed, who's going to make good decisions. He had opportunities. He was open, dropped some of those passes, and in my opinion, he took a step back and allowed, Wendell Smallwood to, not by anything Smallwood did, but more by the fact that Matt Jones did worse, allow Smallwood to kind of assert himself as probably the guy that's leading that position battle right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's Scott Grayson. Scott, thanks for joining us on the first edition.
Yeah, baby. You're back, Grayson.
He's back. He is back.
Now get some rest.
Thank you.
You're not driving now, are you, Scott?
No, I'm not.
All right, good. I was going to say.
I did enough for that last
night. Scott Grayson, everyone, on this year's first edition of Grayson's Grades. Don't forget, everything that you just heard and more is on the 97.3 ESPN website.